In 2016, the movie The Conjuring 2 told us the story of the Enfield poltergeist. But who is the real family behind this story and what really happened to them? It all began in a council flat at 284 Green Street in London in August of 1977. A council flat is a home owned by the British Housing Authority. It is a home offered to a low-income family at a reduced rate. In this home, Peggy Hodgson lived with her 4 children. She was raising them as a single mother, which was a little unusual for the time period, after divorce from her husband. Her children were Margaret, age 12, Janet, age 11, Johnny, age 10, and Billy, age 7. One night, Margaret and Janet would play with a Ouija board, and at only 11 and 12, it is unlikely that they knew the potential consequences of this innocent game, but they would find out, and they would find out quickly. Shortly after playing the game, one night, the mother was downstairs tidying up. She had told her children to go upstairs and get ready for bed. She heard them upstairs, and she called out to them to settle down, and they responded that they couldn't because their beds were shaking, vibrating. Peggy dismissed this. She thought the kids were just fooling around, and she again told them to settle down. The following evening, the same thing would happen, only this time, Peggy marched upstairs. She was done, she was fed up with the kids, and she was going to make them go to bed. But when she got to Janet's room, she saw a dresser moving across the room. She tried to push it back and said a force was pushing it back at her. She was very scared. She gathered up her children. She went next door where Vic and Peggy Nottingham lived, and she told them what was happening. Now, Vic was a big, burly man. He was a builder by trade, and he rushed over to the house to see what was going on and see if he could help out his neighbor and her children. But when he got to the house, he said what he saw scared him. He saw things moving on their own and heard knocking up and down the walls. Not knowing what else to do, they called the police. Police reports state that the police that responded also witnessed the activity. One of the officers, by the name of Carolyn Heaps, said that she witnessed a large armchair move almost 4 feet across the room by itself. Now, the police even looked for things like wires to see if this was a hoax that the family was, trying to pull on them. But they saw no evidence of this. In fact, they basically told the family, we can only validate you. We can tell you that we see and we hear the same thing that you are, but it's not a police matter and there's nothing that we can do. And soon Peggy was left alone with her children to endure this house that was becoming more and more active with paranormal activity. The family said that things like cold spells were common in the house, just breezes that would go through the house, that matches would ignite on their own, that large puddles of water would just appear on the floor, that they continuously heard this knocking all over the walls. Things would just move and people and objects would be hurled across the room. But the most frightening thing was Janet would levitate in her sleep. Now, this was witnessed not only by the occupants of the home, but also by Peggy's brother and his wife, who lived a few doors down. Janet seemed to be the magnet for the activity. And being that she was going through puberty, this is not unusual in these kind of stories. It all seemed to center around her. In fact, she soon started going into trances, and while she was in a trance, she would speak in an old man, gruff voice. She would start to say, as the old man, I died in the chair in the corner of the living room, allegedly a chair that was still in the home. I went blind right before I died. I had an aneurysm. It was soon discovered that a gentleman by the name of Bill Wilkins did, in fact, die in that home. And when his son was tracked down, he verified all the information that Janet was saying while in her trance. That, in fact, his father did go blind prior to his death. He did have an aneurysm, and he did die in that room in the corner in his chair. Pretty soon, Peggy knew that, she needed more help between everything that they were experiencing and now these trances. It was time to call somebody in. And that's just what she did. So she contacted the Society for Psychical Research, and they came in and they got some great video and audio evidence in this home. They actually said that it was some of the best evidence of a haunting or a poltergeist that they had ever got. And I'll tell you, I've seen some of the footage, and if this 11-year-old was faking it, she's darn good, because the voice that she used in these trances, it actually sounded like a man, an older man, a sickly man, kind of a grumpy old man, if you will. And actually, they even had objects thrown at them. And some of this was captured on video. Now, 2 of the researchers did say that they caught Janet and Margaret bending spoons, trying to get the researchers to believe that a ghost did it. But despite this, they said that there's no way that these kids really were behind all of the activity in this home, because with all that they witnessed on their own, they were never able to debunk it. They were never able to find a cause for it. So after the researchers had been in the home, Ed and Lorraine Warren would enter the picture, and they would do their own investigation. And they also said that, in their opinion, this was a true haunting and one of the most active poltergeist homes that they had ever been in. So after all of the researchers were done, and Ed and Lorraine Warren, in came the press. And BBC was in there. There was miniseries done. There was documentaries done. Ultimately, the film was done. All of these people were in and out of the house, and nobody ever was able to debunk this haunting. So that's a lot of people. Like I said, over 30 people, independent witnesses, say that they saw and heard the same things that the family was alleging. Now, the children at this time were still in school, and they actually said that it was a very difficult time for them, because as word got out, they became known as the ghost kids, and that people would do things like spit on them and throw bugs at them. Eventually, the mom even had a nervous breakdown. It was kind of, according to her daughter, a combination of the haunting and a feeling exploited, because she felt like, when all these other people came in, and particularly the press, she never really felt like she had any control over what was being said or the story of what was happening in her home. Now, Janet ended up going to a psychiatric facility for a while, and while she was there, they did a lot of testing on her. She had the electrodes, they did psychiatric testing, and they found nothing physical and nothing mental that could explain if, in fact, she was the one behind this, what would be causing her to do it. So the son, Johnny, who was 10 when all of this began, he actually ended up dying of cancer at only 14. And the mom ended up dying in 2003 of cancer as well. And Janet, as an adult, lost her 18-year-old son, who died in his sleep. So this family had really been through just a lot of really unfortunate situations in their life that some contribute to their haunting, and some say has nothing to do with that, but they just seemed plagued by very unfortunate circumstances. So after the mother's death, and I should say she stayed in the home up until her death, and for those who would be thinking, well, why would she stay in the home that long? There was an exorcism done. And the family said that after the exorcism, things really settled down a lot. But that they always said right up until the end of her life, even when the mom was living there alone, when the kids had moved out, they never really felt alone. Although they weren't, having all of these loud and disruptive things happening, they always felt like somebody was watching them, and they always felt a presence in their home. But after her death, Janet kind of distanced herself from the story. She didn't really like to talk about it for a long time, but eventually she came forward, and eventually she wanted to be a voice for what actually happened there, because like her mother, she felt very exploited by a lot of the coverage of it. And she really wanted people to understand that everything that she and her siblings and her mother alleged happened on Green Street did in fact happen. Now, after the mother passed, another family moved in, and this family said that they also experienced things in that home, including disembodied voices, entire conversations, and that their son, who also was pre-puberty age, woke up one night to see a man standing in his room. And this family was like, we're not sticking around. They were out in less than 2 months. After they moved out, another family moved in, and this family chose not to speak about it. The mother, the only thing that she said was that she had very small children who were not aware of the history of the house, and she wanted to keep it that way, and she chose not to speak. So we'll never know if they were having any type of experiences or not. So that is the story of the Enfield haunting and the family that lived there. Janet, to this day, still, like I said, maintains that everything that her family said happened actually happened, and she's very honest about the couple of things that her and her sister did fake. She said, whatever, we were kids, we kind of just thought it was fun to see if the researchers would figure out that certain things were us or not, or if they would attribute those things to the ghost. They were kids. So she's very honest about that, but says, it was like this much of the story, and that everything else was completely authentic. And to this day, researchers call this story one of the most active hauntings that they had ever been a part of researching, and that their evidence is still to this day not able to be debunked. So tell me what you think of the story. Do you believe the family? Do you think that they made it up? And if you think they made it up, how do you think they did it? Do you think it was just Janet and her sister Margaret, and they were the masterminds behind the whole entire thing? Do you think that if they made it up, that the mom knew that they were making it up? Or do you think that, in fact, this story was a case of an absolute true haunting, and one that surely will continue to be something that you will find video coverage of, movies, documentaries, because when you can't debunk something, it sure does fascinate us, doesn't it? So I will see you next time. Bye.